I want to start with the guy you have going to the Steelers at number 21 overall, and that's Jaxson Dart. And this has become a very polarizing topic in Pittsburgh. Should they draft a quarterback? And if so, who should it be? So tell us about him from the intel you've gotten, Bruce, and maybe along the way here, if you can think of a comparable, that would be helpful.
Yeah, I mean, he's a very tough kid. When you talk to coaches who played him, the thing they admire most is that he is pretty fearless. He's got a live arm. He's a good athlete. I feel like he checks a lot of boxes. I'm not sure what he is great at, to be honest. And if he was great at anything, he wouldn't still be around in the 20s when this is not a good quarterback draft. Let me start by saying I think Cam Ward is clearly, I think there's a bigger gap between 1 and 2 than there is. I think Shador is number 2, and the gap between him and anybody else. I feel like you have a bunch of guys who each have some pretty good traits, nothing that really shines through. But he is tough. His arm is good. He put up a lot of numbers in Lane Kiffin's system. Now, the thing that I would be most reluctant on him is they had a really talented team at Ole Miss. This team should have been a playoff team. They lost 3 games, one against a really bad Kentucky team, and the game was in Oxford. They lost to Florida, where if they win that game, they're probably making the playoff. And Florida was not very good this year. LSU wasn't that good. They lost that game. So the big game aspect is one thing, because he beat Georgia, but it wasn't like, I felt like the defense really beat Georgia that day. He got hurt. He got knocked out of the game. The backup came in, played pretty well for a while, and then he came in and played well. But again, I don't feel like this was a guy who played and won a ton of big games. That's the part that would give me a little pause with him. But I feel like if you need a quarterback here, the question is, do they look and say, all right, we're going to wait and we can get somebody, Tyler Shuck from Louisville, who's bigger quarterback, really good athlete. The knocks on him are he has struggled to stay healthy. Last year at Louisville was really the first year he finished. And also his age, he's going to be 26 years old. Will Howard, a Pennsylvania native who helped Ohio State win the national title. I think Will Howard will play in the NFL for a long time. I just don't know if he's going to be a upper level starter. There's nothing that really stands out. And that's the part where I was like, oof, if it's not Cam Ward, I feel like it's a crapshoot when it comes to this level of quarterbacks.
Bruce Feldman from The Athletic, his mock draft is out. He is on the Sullivan Super Service fan hotline, Pittsburgh's trusted plumbing HVAC provider for over 50 years. Bruce also wrote a book called The Quarterback, The Making of Modern Quarterbacks. So this is a topic where he knows what he's talking about here. So let's go back to Jaxson Dart. People's fear is that this would be a very similar, not only a similar reach at a time of need, but a similar quarterback to Kenny Pickett. Your thoughts on that, Bruce? Can you think of a comparable? Is it Pickett? Somebody else that you can think of?
The tough part with Pickett is Pickett actually won big games for Pitt. Like, to me, Pickett did not have as much talent around him as Jaxson Dart did. Now, Jaxson Dart played in a tougher league, but I still think, it wasn't like you told me, oh, Kenny Pickett's going to be a Pro Bowl quarterback. But I wouldn't be any more bullish on Jaxson Dart now than I was on Kenny Pickett then, because at least Kenny Pickett, elevated the team. I'm not saying Jaxson Dart didn't. I mean, the last 2 years at Ole Miss have been really good years, but that team should have been a playoff team, and they weren't. And I think this doesn't mean he can't be a really good NFL quarterback, but if he was a guy people would be looking at as a future star quarterback in the NFL, I would have thought he would have elevated that team into a playoff team.
Yeah.
That's the part that gives me a little pause. Again, physically, there's a lot to like. I know that the people around Ole Miss really like him. It's just that's the one thing I was like,
No, I hear you.
And as far as comparisons, again, I don't think there is there's a wow factor there in terms of of the guys who are not Cam Ward. there's maybe one or two here or there. Like, one thing Jalen Milroe can really do, he's an electrifying runner. Now, I think Steeler fans saw like a dynamic runner, and how well did that work out for them, at quarterback. And again, you have a really inconsistent thrower. Like, I don't know, Milrose to me is more of a project for the next couple of years. I mean, everyone I've talked to there really loves his work ethic. He's got a big, strong arm. His arm is stronger than a lot of the guys we're talking about, but it's inaccurate, and the consistency really would give me concern. But in terms of like a trait, he does have, like, he's a really dynamic runner. These other guys are good at a lot of things. They're not great at anything, though.
Bruce, I was the leader of the Jaxson Dart bandwagon here. In fact, I was driving it. I had Jack Ham on my side, and you've bummed me out to the point where I'm considering closing the thing and stopping the sale of tickets for the Jaxson Dart bandwagon. Given everything you've said, why do you think the Steelers would go for him at 21? It sounds like you think that would be a mistake.
The parts I'm hesitant with, again, come back to the just elevating everybody around him. I think he was a really good college quarterback. You kept on waiting for him to take the next big step, and that didn't happen. That doesn't mean that in the NFL he can't do it. When he got to USC, he was a guy who kind of blew up late in the recruiting process, and he was there, and they ended up, Keaton Slovis, a name a lot of folks down there will remember, was the starter, got hurt. Dart went in. They fired Clay Helton, the coaches, before Lincoln Riley got there, and they were hoping he'd really rally them. There's a lot to put on a true freshman. Then he went to Ole Miss. He's out of football. I just think if it was last year, I don't think anybody's looking at Jaxson Dart as a first round guy. That's all I'm thinking. Again, if you told me Jaxson Dart ended up being a good starter and ended up having like an Andy Dalton career where he wasn't like a star but was like a solid starter, it wouldn't shock me. I just don't know if I would say, okay, this guy, to me, another USC quarterback who's a good athlete, who's a really tough guy, Sam Darnold. I think Sam Darnold threw it better than he does, and Sam Darnold has, obviously he was really good with the Vikings for a while. He really struggled with the Jets. I feel like he's Darnold-like, but I don't think he throws it as well. I don't think he's quite as good as Darnold. Darnold, to me, also, again, did he elevate? Darnold led his team to a Rose Bowl win early in his career when they had beat Saquon and Penn State in an amazing Rose Bowl game. Like, he had good receivers now, in fairness to him, but still, I think he is in the Darnold mode, but I just don't think he's quite as good as Darnold.